Hello, this is Brother Cromar from the Math Department at BYU, Idaho, and this is part 2 of Lesson 15, Inference for Several Means, ANOVA. And so here's the second example that I promised I would go through, and so here is, let's go through this was found in the online textbook. Nike, a company that makes sporting goods including shoes, funded a study to compare 5 soccer shoe designs. The objective of the research was to determine if there was a difference in the mean accuracy soccer players achieved using different Nike shoe designs. As part of the research, they asked trained soccer players to kick a ball at a target. The target was placed 115 centimeters above the ground and at a distance of 10 meters from the players. Using electronic equipment, the researchers recorded the distance from the center of the target to the point where the ball hit. The objective of the research was to assess if footwear could affect the accuracy of a soccer player. Subjects wore 5 different soccer shoes, and for one treatment they kicked the ball in stocking feet, and they used a level of significance of alpha equal to 0.10. Now, if you haven't done this yet with the online textbook, I would suggest that you would stop the video and do this first, and then go through the answers. Okay. So step number 1 is state the known alternative hypothesis. So the mean is the null hypothesis that all the means are equal. The alternative is one or more of the means differ than the others, or one of the more mean scores different, or the distance is different than the others. So steps 2, 3, and 4, we will get that using software. That is the test statistic, the degrees of freedom, and the p-value. So if you go, and I'll go to the software here in SPSS, which is similar to Excel. Here's where we get our test statistic, which is under the F. The degrees of freedom, there's 1 for the numerator between groups, which is 5, and the denominator, which is 114, which is within groups. And then our p-value is 0.081. Okay, rounded 3 decimal places to the right of the decimal. Okay, so then, because our p-value is less than our level of significance, we still reject the null hypothesis. Okay, and so therefore, let me move this up here, we have sufficient evidence to say at least one mean distance from center of target is different across the 5 different types of footwear. Now, if I were to sketch this distribution, I would have a right skew distribution where I would label my test statistic, the F, at 2.021, and then I would shade to the right. Okay. So finally is checking requirements in descriptive statistics for ANOVA. Okay, so before doing ANOVA, here are the requirements. Now, the first 2 requirements, you just have to look at the problem to see if, first of all, if all the samples are from simple random sampling, and then the samples are independent. But the 2 that we need to check is, one is that the populations have the same variance, and how we check that is if the largest standard deviation is no more than the 2 times the smallest standard deviation. The other requirement that we need to check is that the data are normally distributed, so each group, for each group, so we use QQ plots so we can assume the sampling distributions for each population is normal. Now what I'd like to do is with these 2, I want to show you some output that I have here. And so say for instance, let's look at the for the gratitude data, the 3 different groups: events, grateful, and hassles. What we do here is that we look for the largest standard deviation out of these 3, which is this one right here. And if this is no more than 2 times the smallest standard deviation, then we can assume equal variances. And looking at the smallest versus the largest, it looks like we can assume equal variances. For the other requirement check that we could do is that we would look at the QQ plots. And so here, for the 3 different groups, here are the 3 different QQ plots. This one here, and this one down here. One for hassles, grateful, and events. And it looks like that all 3 of these, that we can assume that the data is normally distributed, so therefore the distribution of sample means for each group is normally distributed. Okay, so now the descriptive statistics, we will ask you to list the sample size, the sample mean, and standard deviation from all the samples. And for the graphs, it's either a histogram or a box plot for all groups. And so where you can get that for the software is that it'll be listed. For instance, in the example here, for the events, grateful, and hassles, you can list the sample size, the mean, and standard deviation. They're right here. And then if you want to get a histogram, you can get a histogram, which looks like something like this down here. Or if you want to do box plots, you can have something that looks like this here. And that concludes part 2 of lesson 15, which is dealing with ANOVA. If you have any questions, please speak to your instructor.